there. Welcome into Fantasy Baseball today on Wednesday, November 8th. I am Frank Stampfl, reunited with Scott White. So much has happened since we last talked. We'll break it all down on today's show. A World Series champion has been crowned. GM meetings are underway. Tons of news to talk about. We've got options, managers being signed, all this kind of crazy stuff. And I did my first 2024 draft. We'll take a look at that. I have a draft board for everyone watching on YouTube. You can follow along, see where some players are going. First up, no surprise, First Pitch Arizona was amazing. Cannot recommend it enough for baseball fans, fantasy baseball players alike. Great people, tons of fun. I went to Game 5 of the World Series. That was awesome. Went to 3 AFL games. Attended the Home Run Derby out there. The Fall Stars game. I got to do a live podcast with the Welsh, which I highly recommend you check out because we interviewed James Triantos, Cubs prospect. So that was cool, but awesome stuff. Big thank you to Brent Hershey, Ray Murphy, and everybody else at Baseball HQ. Now, Scott, one of the questions I received most at First Pitch Arizona, where is Scott White? With that, where are you, Scott? What's going on, man?
I'm still here in sunny South Florida. Didn't make my way over to sunny Arizona. No. I don't know. It's hard to break away from the family for that long, particularly after, kind of, what's the way to put it? The season is busy. The regular season is, daddy's pretty busy during the regular season. And so, I hate to take off as soon as it's over for a week and, leave even more of the responsibilities for my wife. So it sounds like a fun time. But yeah, no, that's what I was doing. That's what I was doing while you were in Arizona.
I love this new you referring to yourself as daddy in the third person. It's great.
That's how I'm referred to most often in life. It's only a season in life where you're known as daddy, and at some point you got to embrace it. That's my identity at present. It won't always be. I'll become dad and not nearly as often because, they'll move away and live their own lives. Potentially, hopefully. So no, right now I'm daddy. That's the way it is.
Yep. That did come up on our live podcast with the Welsh. We were talking about Tarek Skubal, and I was like, yeah, Tarek Skubal kind of makes people say and do weird things. Scott White referred to himself as daddy when ranking Tarek Skubal. So that was a lot of fun. Let's move on to the World Series, Scott. You haven't had a chance to talk about it. The Rangers are World Series champions for the first time in franchise history. And in the end, you got your way.
Yeah. In the end, I think regression hit the Diamondbacks pretty hard. The underdog can only take advantage of the sort of things that happen over a small sample for so long. As the playoffs extend, the sample becomes bigger. The fourth highest, the team with the fourth best run differential in baseball during the season, the Texas Rangers. I know they barely made it in the playoffs, but they did have the fourth best run differential in all of baseball. And I think in the World Series, that disparity showed against a team that had a negative run differential during the season, was outscored during the season, and the Diamondbacks. And, congratulations to the Rangers. I do think the better team won, at least in that final round. And I know first championship in franchise history. That's a lot to celebrate. And, they're well positioned to make a run at it next year too, I would say. They, like, one of the things I tweeted out after they won, I think the one thing I tweeted out was they won the World Series and they still haven't called up Wyatt Langford yet. I mean, like the toast of the prospect world is in the organization of the defending World Series champions, and right, like, pushing for a job next spring, I would say. So without even having to spend any dollars, the Rangers, there's a good chance they're even better just by promoting that guy next year, Wyatt Langford.
Yeah, and hopefully a full season of Evan Carter as well. should potentially see Jacob deGrom at some point, probably in the second half next season too. So congrats to the Rangers. Great season for them. Looks like they're set up for a while here. I mentioned I was at the game. Both guys pitched amazing, Zach Gallen and Nathan Eovaldi. The D-backs had so many opportunities early in that game. I think they left Corbin Carroll stranded at third in each of the first and third innings. They also had him at third with one out, and they couldn't get him in. So, like, they had their chances and just couldn't score any runs early in that game. And then I think the pressure just kind of built, and that's what happened. Shout out to Corey Seager, too. Awesome season and series for him. Let's get into the news, Scott. And normally I don't lead with managers, but it seems to be the talk of baseball right now. Craig Counsell has signed with the Cubs, seemingly out of nowhere, on a huge 5-year deal worth more than $40 million. He said he wanted to kind of reset the manager market in baseball. They were, I guess some might say, underpaid compared to other major sports that are out there. Counsell managed the Brewers since 2015. And I know this is kind of fluky, but I like to look at, stolen base tendencies under certain managers. Since 2015, the Brewers had the third most stolen bases in baseball. It depends which players you have on your team. I know that's a big part of it, but I don't know, Scott. Maybe we could see the Cubs run a little bit more in 2024. But your thoughts here, Craig Counsell to Chicago.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was a surprise. It wasn't a surprise that Counsell was leaving. That seemed like a foregone conclusion. But where he ended up, I kind of thought he'd follow David Stearns to the Mets. The Cubs might be a better situation for him. It just didn't even seem like they were in play for a manager. It seemed like they were pretty happy with David Ross. And like the Cubs have a history of doing this. It reminds me of, back when they were still under Theo Epstein and they hired Rick Renteria as their manager. Things seemed to be going well. It was like, this is our guy. And then Joe Madden becomes available. And just like that, Rick Renteria's shown the door. And that seems to be the case here. You got to watch out if you're managing for the Cubs. If another girl comes along, your commitments mean nothing.
The Guardians also have themselves a manager. They signed former catcher Stephen Vogt as their manager. He's a first-time manager. So will be interesting to see how things work out there. Obviously, Terry Francona was with Cleveland since 2013. And, we kind of associated Francona with, having good pitchers and leaving his pitchers in and kind of letting them go deep into games and having a set closer every year. And, since 2013, the Guardians were also third in stolen bases. So Terry Francona, for fantasy, say what you will, he was great. So I don't know if we'll get any indication on what Stephen Vogt's tendencies are, but it should be interesting to find out in 2024.
Yeah, I will say, this was kind of an outside the box pick. Obviously, I wasn't Vogt the bullpen coach for the Mariners, so he wasn't something like that. So he wasn't, out of the coaching field completely, but a newcomer to it and wasn't doing it for long. You talked about some of the players you interviewed in Arizona. I haven't interviewed a ton of players in my role here with CBS, maybe a couple dozen over the years. None of those interviews stood out to me like Stephen Vogt. Like he was just such a thoughtful guy and such an engaging guy. Like I came out of the conversation feeling like I just made a new friend. Like I became Stephen Vogt's biggest fan that day. Like regardless of whatever he was doing on the baseball diamond, like I just like that's a guy I want to get behind, and that's a very good quality in a manager. So if that's my one interaction with Stephen Vogt that went that way, I can understand how he aced his interview to become manager of a major league team. And so hopefully he's successful in that role. I keep talking about things that don't have any relevance to fantasy. I know, so I should probably get back on track with that. We don't know his tendencies. You're right. If I could circle back to the point you were making about Craig Counsell with the Cubs, and maybe they run more based on the Brewers' tendencies under him. Well, Horner already the big base stealer for them last year was Nico Horner, right? How many did he end up with? Almost 40.
Yeah, I think 38.
Yeah. No, 43. He he eclipsed 40 with 43. So I don't know how much room there is for him to improve. Dansby Swanson's stolen base total was pretty disappointing in his first year with the Cubs. He had only 9 of them a year after having 18. And who else? There was somebody else. I
You
think
definitely have some names that could run. Ian Happ, Suzuki, Christopher Morel.
Yeah, Morel, that was the one. Because when he got called up, obviously he spent some time in the majors in 2022 also, but when he got called up in 2023, the thinking was, okay, as long as this guy doesn't strike out too much, he's going to be a power speed threat. And he wasn't a speed threat at all. He stole just 6 bases. Let me see what his sprint speed was. 81st percentile. So yeah, those are the two I would maybe reserve some hope for improving their stolen base output under Craig Counsell. How much that managerial change is going to impact that is hard to say, but they at least have shown the capability in the past to do that.
Yeah, I believe the Cubs were 8th in stolen bases last year, so they were already pretty aggressive, but hopefully Counsell keeps that up or maybe even improves that aggressiveness on the base paths. We had one other managerial hire. The Mets brought in Carlos Mendoza, who was the Yankees bench coach for the previous 4 years. Obviously, we don't know much about the tendencies there either, but his first time managing, we'll see how that works out. Teams that remain without a manager, the Astros, Angels, Brewers, and Padres. Actually just saw before we started recording, the Angels are interviewing Ron Washington, the Braves third base coach, for their opening. So we'll see what happens there. We did have a front office hire. The Marlins brought in Peter Bendix, who is now their president of baseball operations. He was the Rays GM under Eric Neander the past 2 seasons. You know that Kim Ng is no longer in the Marlins organization. And Peter Bendix is going to be the new name running the show there.
Did you mention Bob Melvin?
I did not mention Bob Melvin, but I think we mentioned him recently. Maybe you weren't on that podcast.
Maybe not. Yeah,
I
Giants
think
new manager.
he signed a couple of weeks ago, right? Or was it last week? I think it was a couple of weeks ago.
I don't think it would have been able. I think it was last week.
Okay.
It wasn't a couple weeks ago.
Do you have any thoughts on it?
Not really.
All right. Well, yeah, Bob Melvin.
Good manager.
Yeah. Should be good. The options, again, we had a bunch of these accepted, declined. I think the big one, and kind of saw the writing on the wall here, the White Sox declined their $14 million club option on Tim Anderson. I'm sure there will be lots of interest. It's already been reported that Anderson was playing with that knee injury since he first got hurt way back in April. So perhaps a bounce back on the horizon. I know you've already expressed some optimism with Tim Anderson. I think the other side of this for the White Sox, Scott, is it could lead to an opening for their top prospect, Colson Montgomery, to potentially get an opportunity. I don't think it'll be opening day or even early on, but maybe in the second half of the season. I saw Montgomery out in the AFL. The first game I saw, he struck out twice, and he looked really bad doing it. And then in the Fall Stars game, he hit a 400-foot home run off of a lefty, left on left. So that was pretty impressive. Any thoughts on Tim Anderson and Colson Montgomery?
Yeah, I've expressed some hope for Tim Anderson having a bounce back season, and I expect the price is going to be very low, like a late round middle infield option, whose underlying numbers don't suggest as rapid decline as the overlying numbers would suggest. But it's going to require a team to actually sign him to be their starting shortstop, or I don't know, maybe they can move him to second base, but he needs to get the at-bats. And given that he's not a high OBP guy, I don't think it's a foregone conclusion he will sign to be an everyday player somewhere. I think that's something we're going to want to monitor in the offseason where Tim Anderson ends up. Colson Montgomery is a great prospect. I think he's going to be consensus top 10 overall prospect. Huge on-base guy in the minors. Really good plate discipline. The power has been more theoretical than actual so far, but I mean, clearly you saw how far he could hit a ball as an eyewitness in Arizona, and I think he could take a huge step with the power production in the minors this year, and that might determine when he ultimately gets called up by the White Sox. That's Colson Montgomery.
We do have a few more NFBC drafts that have been completed. 18 now done in the books, and Tim Anderson's ADP 311.4. So a very, very late round pick. I'm sure once he signs somewhere and we learn more, we'll probably see that ADP jump about 50 spots or something.
Right. The uncertainty, I think, is driving down the price. But, if he signs somewhere to be a utility guy, maybe the price drops even more.
The White Sox also declined their $15 million club option on Liam Hendricks. He's expected to miss most, if not all, of 2024 following Tommy John surgery. Eduardo Rodriguez opted out of the final 3 years of his Tigers contract, and as of now, the Tigers rotation includes Tarek Skubal, Matt Manning, Reese Olson, Sawyer Gibson-Long, and Casey Mize, all 27 years old or younger. Again, they could sign someone in the offseason, we'll see, but as of now, they've got a young rotation and a decent bit of upside. So I don't know. Kind of excited for the Tigers pitchers. Marcus Stroman opted out of the final year of his Cubs contract, passing up $21 million. That seemed a little surprising to me. He won't get more than $21 million annually. I guess he probably wants to get another multi-year deal, but a little surprising.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I think it's less about the annual value there than just getting some more years in the bag. And I think given the current state of pitching, he shouldn't have too much trouble getting a deal he's happy with.
I think for Marcus Stroman, too, something to pay attention is the defense behind him, especially the infield defense. I know the Cubs rated as one of the best defensive teams last year, and Marcus Stroman was really good before he got hurt. So I think that's something we should pay close attention to, the defense behind Marcus Stroman, wherever he does decide to sign. The Braves picked up Charlie Morton's $20 million option, so he's back with the team. We know the ERA was solid, 3.64. He had a bunch of strikeouts again. The whip obviously is a killer, so we'll see. I don't know. I don't think we want to bet on a 40-year-old kind of getting better at this point in his career, but
no, I'm definitely beyond hyping up Charlie Morton. I would say I've done my starting pitcher rankings now. I've done all my position by position rankings.
I am jealous.
FYI, it's just a matter of combining them now into overall rankings. Charlie Morton checks in 63rd for me at starting pitcher, which means he's going to get drafted in all but the shallowest of leagues.
He's in the glob.
Oh, he's firmly in the glob. He had 183 strikeouts this year.
That's useful.
And, wasn't very good last year either and had 205 strikeouts. And kind of my guiding principle at starting pitcher this year, and I've alluded to this in the past, is that it's kind of a back to basics approach at starting pitching, where like strikeouts, that is the one thing a pitcher has the most control over, how many strikeouts he gets. And it just so happens that there is a pretty clear correlation between strikeouts and overall success. So, that's kind of a secondary issue, but it is so that if you're not allowing contact in the first place, you're probably going to do better. I don't know that that's necessarily the case for Charlie Morton. Again, it's a secondary point, but that is also one of the thoughts behind going all in for strikeouts as starting pitcher. But the primary reason for this, it's the one thing a pitcher can control. It's the one predictable thing in a very unpredictable era at starting pitcher. That's what the glob's all about, right? So go for the thing that you can for sure count on being there. The fact it's a counting stat as opposed to a ratio stat also helps with that idea. Like, you sell out for strikeouts, you're probably going to lead your league in strikeouts, and you may just end up with a great pitching staff overall. So that's maybe the rationale for taking Charlie Morton at a low cost, but we're also at a point where you have to expect he's going to hurt you in whip, at least, if not ERA.
Yeah, and as we saw with some of the older guys this year, Verlander, Scherzer, I mean, it can happen like that, right? So he's got to improve the control. Not sure that it's going to happen. I would say expect a bad whip, maybe solid ERA. Still pitches for a great team, so should get you some wins and obviously lots of strikeouts there for Charlie Morton. Josh Bell exercised his $16.5 million player option with the Marlins. which I think is fine. He's going to have a starting role. He's probably a corner infielder for fantasy. He played 53 games with the Marlins, hit 270 with 11 home runs and an 818 OPS. He was pretty good with the Marlins. Speaking of the Marlins, Jorge Soler declined his $13 million player option. He's a free agent. The Twins exercised options on both Jorge Polanco and Max Kepler. Justin Turner declined his $13.4 million player option, earning a $6.7 million buyout in the process. So that seems like a no-brainer for him, why he would do that. And hopefully this helps the Red Sox find playing time for guys like Wilyer Abreu and Jarren Duran and Ceddanne Rafaela next season. Yeah. The end of an era. The Reds have declined their $20 million club option on Joey Votto. He spent 17 years in Cincinnati. Obviously makes sense. They got all these young kids coming up, and they obviously need places to play them. Apparently, Votto already receiving some interest in his home country team, the Toronto Blue Jays. So we'll pay attention there.
Fill the Brandon Belt role there next year, maybe.
That's right.
I also want to mention, like, the Justin Turner thing frees up a log. You did mention it, but I want to stress it even more. Like, the log jam that existed there between outfield and first base for the Red Sox. This hopefully means full-time at-bats for Tristan Casas, who I had already ranked 9th at first base for next year. You mentioned Wilyer Abreu, who I like a lot, hits the ball hard and draws walks. And also Ceddanne Rafaela, who could carve out a nifty role as a part-time center field or part-time shortstop, as we saw in September. I mean, it's possible the Red Sox bring Justin Turner back. He obviously had a very good year for them. But I hope they don't. I hope they don't, because I would like to see that logjam freed up and some of those other players get a chance to shine.
Yeah, I agree with that too. The Padres declined their 2-year, $32 million team option for Michael Wacha, making him a free agent. Seth Lugo declined his $7.5 million player option. The Padres rotation as of November 8th. Joe Musgrove, Yu Darvish, Matt Waldron, Pedro Avila, and Jay Groom. So not really sure where they go. Maybe they make a trade this offseason. This crazy story came out over the weekend. We were talking about it beforehand. The Padres took out a $50 million loan, according to reports, to help cover short-term expenses, including player payroll. And apparently they're also looking to lower payroll. So I don't know that anyone's going to take on like Bogarts or Yu Darvish or Cronenworth or anything like that. But I think the Padres could be busy this offseason.
Yeah, I'm kind of stunned AJ Preller still has a job, right? Yeah. I mean, to go so hard that you're taking out a $50 million loan, like, you got to win. And they didn't even make the playoffs. Crazy. And I feel bad for him, because I thought, their team certainly looked amazing on paper. I think everybody had it as a playoff team. And I enjoy watching him work in the offseason. He's about as aggressive as a GM can be. But like, I'm kind of surprised he's still there, because that seems like a gamble. That seems like a huge gamble that ended with huge failure.
Let's run through the rest of these. The Rangers exercised their $6.25 million option on Jose Leclerc and a $13 million option on Andrew Heaney. The Cubs exercised a $16 million option on Kyle Hendricks. Their rotation entering the offseason: Justin Steele, Jamison Tyone, Hendricks, Jordan Wicks, and Javier Assad. Javier Baez will not opt out of the remaining 4 years, $98 million on his deal with the Tigers.
Oh, really?
There was some talk that he was going to opt out, but that clearly is not.
Somebody must have talked some sense into him.
Right.
You're not that good anymore, Javier.
Ooh. Mike Clevenger declined his $12 million mutual option with the White Sox. The Dodgers declined $18 million option on Lance Lynn. Blue Jays declined their $18 million mutual option on Whit Merrifield. Michael Conforto did not opt out and is returning to the Giants for $18 million. Ross Stripling. What's up?
That's another like, what? Duh, how's Michael Conforto after the year he just had going to turn down $18 million?
Yeah, I think the same thing could probably be said for Ross Stripling. He exercised $12.5 million option with the Giants. Your Braves declined Eddie Rosario's $9 million option, potentially opening up a spot for Vaughn Grissom to play the outfield. Maybe they signed somebody. I'm not so sure.
Yeah, I was a little surprised by that one. 9 million seemed like a reasonable amount to pay for a guy who had 21 homers and 74 RBIs. A platoon bat, was actually a Gold Glove finalist in left field. I don't never thought of Eddie Rosario as a good defender, but he was a Gold
Interesting.
Glove finalist, and only 9 million. I don't know, kind of surprising. It does make me think that they're ready to transition Vaughn Grissom to the outfield, and see what he can do in a full-time role. I don't think there's a ton of power there. I don't think there's a ton of speed there, but he has shown a penchant for getting lots of hits, and maybe that would help round out the lineup a little better. A lineup that's full of big power bats already.
I'm like, come on, Scott. Do they really need to round out their lineup?
Well, you know what I mean. Just like a different style of
Right.
hitter, so that uh, there are more dimensions to the lineup, I guess.
Alrighty. Sean Manaea opted out of a 1 year, $12.5 million deal with the Giants. Drew Smyly exercised his $8.5 million player option. He's back with the Cubs. And the Marlins exercised their $3.5 million option on John Birdie.
And I also want to clarify when I say I don't think there's a lot of power and speed there for Vaughn Grissom. I think he could maybe be a 15 homer, 15 steal guy, but I don't see like a 25 season in Vaughn Grissom's future.
Let's take our first break. When we return, some other news and notes. I've got some qualifying offers and just the latest rumblings here from the hot stove. We'll do that right after this.
Friday, honor those who have served.
On a special night at the Naval Academy.
With some hoops for the heroes. Don't miss the Veterans Classic on CBS Sports Network.
Welcome back into Fantasy Baseball. Today, we also had a trade. Not really a big trade, but a trade nonetheless. Mark Canha was shipped over to the Tigers for right-handed pitcher Blake Holub. And Canha had a solid season. He had 262, 11 home runs, 11 steals. He turns 35 years old in February. Roster Resource has Canha in left field for now. Parker Meadows in center. Riley Green in right field. Kerry Carpenter at DH. Again, they can still make a move. Maybe Canha turns into like a fourth outfield platoon type option. But he's with the Tigers. Whatever that's worth.
Not worth much.
Not worth much. All right. 7 players received the qualifying offer, which was a 1 year, $20.3 million deal. No surprise on lots of these names. Shohei Ohtani, Cody Bellinger, Matt Chapman, Sonny Gray, Josh Hader, Aaron Nola, and Blake Snell. None are expected to accept, which means those teams will earn draft compensation if those players sign with a different team. Other random news and notes: the Dodgers signed Max Muncy to a 2-year, $24 million extension with a $10 million club option for 2026. Clayton Kershaw underwent left shoulder surgery to repair ligaments and his shoulder capsule. He's hopeful to return to play at some point next summer. And I'm interested to see what the Dodgers do with their pitching staff, Scott, if anything, because as of now, it looks like they would have to rely pretty heavily on the kids. Bobby Miller, Ryan Papio, Emmett Sheehan, Dustin May in the second half of the season coming back from Tommy John surgery. My guess is they probably either sign or trade for somebody. But
they also have Walker Buehler coming back from
correct.
Tommy John surgery.
Yep.
And I mean, Miller, Papio, and Sheehan look great down the stretch. I want to see them get as many innings as possible next year. I would imagine they'll add some innings eater types, maybe another reclamation project in the Andrew Heaney vein, rather than make a big splash for a starting pitcher. But I could be wrong. Well, they're the Dodgers. They obviously have tons of resources and can pretty much do whatever they want. But I think those young pitchers showed enough promise that they won't want to block them next year. I do think it's interesting that Kershaw says, he's hopeful of returning next summer. I wasn't sure he was going to return at all. I thought we might have seen the last of Clayton Kershaw. So apparently not. Apparently he's still going to be in the mix next year, but not until the second half probably. And so not going to demand much draft capital.
All right. Last Friday, we heard from Astros GM Dana Brown. He said that Yainer Diaz, quote, will be the main guy at catcher next season. Mentioned we have 18 drafts worth of NFBC data. Yainer Diaz, the 5th catcher off the board at pick 138 on average. Casey Mize has been throwing at Tigers spring training complex and will be a full go for the start of spring training. And the hot stove heating up a little bit early on in the offseason. The Red Sox have talked to Jordan Montgomery. Jonathan India is a popular name among executives at the GM meetings. We've talked about this. I think it makes sense. Obviously, the Reds have middle infield prospects, corner infield prospects. They need somewhere to play these guys. They need pitching too. So I think maybe flipping Jonathan India for some pitching makes some sense for the Reds. Sounds like the White Sox are willing to listen to trade offers on Dylan Cease. They have a first-time GM in Chris Getz. And I was reading some of his quotes. You know, he kind of had a presser on Tuesday. Yeah, he seems like he's willing to trade anybody. So, like, the doors are open in Chicago. The phones are open, rather. And
They should be.
yeah, Cease. He mentioned Eloy Jimenez possibility. So
Not a lot there beyond Colson Montgomery. Worth keeping around.
indeed, Luis Severino.
Luis Robert.
Yeah.
You talk about Luis Robert?
I didn't see his name mentioned, but I did see Eloy and Dylan Cease. Names popped up there. Luis Severino has already generated interest from as many as 8 teams. And here's a kind of old name. I can't really say fun name. Eric Fetty is drawing interest from MLB teams after dominating the KBO this past season. 20 wins, a 2 ERA on the nose, .95 whip, 209 strikeouts, over 180 and a third innings. And there's like a whiff of like Miles Michaelis here and Merrill Kelly. Those guys went to the KBO, kind of recreated themselves, came back and had some success in the majors. I was listening to the RotoWire podcast with Tim McLeod, who follows everything kind of overseas with Japan and KBO. And he had some really great things to say about Eric Fetty. So I don't know that he's going to be like a great starter when he returns, but there is a chance. So just kind of follow that name away and we'll see.
Yeah, it was
he signs.
A top prospect, not when he was working his way up the national system, and entered the mix at a time when they were loaded. They had Scherzer, they had Gio Gonzalez. They were, one of the premier teams in baseball, and so I'm not sure he ever got the. I'm not sure he ever got the opportunity to. I know he got opportunities, but to thrive, really, I think he deserves a second chance, particularly given how things have gone for him in Korea. So I'm pretty interested in that too, Eric Fetty. Yeah, yep. I always liked him.
All right, let's talk about my first real draft that I did, and technically it's only half the draft. I drafted 23 rounds worth. We're going to pick up the other 27 rounds in January. It's going to be a slow draft from here on out, but this is the NFBC Draft Champions format. It's a 15-team league, 5x5 roto, draft and hold. 50 rounds total, no waivers, no trades. You just set your lineup each week. And again, it's roto-style lineup, so 2 catchers, 1 of each infield position, a corner infielder, middle infielder, 5 outfielders, 1 utility bat, and 9 hitters. I was drafting 13th overall, and we'll get to my team a little bit later on. We'll just focus on the early rounds here and get a little taste for where players are going early in the offseason. If you're watching us on YouTube, I got the draft board pulled up here. Admittedly, it's going to be pretty hard to see. There's lots of names going on here and lots of different colors and everything. But if you're watching on a TV, or maybe you could just kind of zoom in a little bit, you can take a look at the draft board there. Let's start with the first round, Scott. No starting pitchers in the first 8 picks of this draft. Ronald Acuna, Bobby Witt, Julio Rodriguez, Mookie Betts, Corbin Carroll, Kyle Tucker, Trey Turner, and Freddie Freeman. Sounds about right. It feels like Freeman should maybe be a touch higher. Interesting to see that Turner's late season surge kind of got him back in the top 8 picks here. Does anything kind of stand out? It seems pretty straightforward to me.
Yeah, it's not so different from my initial rankings. And like I said, I have to combine my position by position rankings still, but I have published what I would like the first 2 rounds to be. And mine starts out Acuna, Witt, Julio Rodriguez, just like this one does. Corbin Carroll and Mookie Betts, they're flipped for me. It's Carroll over Betts, but those are the next 2. So the top 5 more or less is exactly the same as I have it. I agree. Freeman's a little low. He would be 6th for me instead of 8th. Sixth,
Mhm.
seventh, eighth. Yeah, he'd
Yeah.
be 6 for me instead of 8th. And Trey Turner is a little on the high side, but I've bumped him up since this article was published, even because he's capable of such a big stolen base total. In addition to providing power, and at times I know this year I expressed doubt that Trey Turner was going to be a great source of batting average again, but basically from the start of August on, he was the same Trey Turner we've always known from before his time with the Phillies. So I think he basically got right. I don't know. The more I think about it, I don't know that I'd object to taking him 7th overall. I think my rankings show him a little lower than that, but it's close enough. It's a pretty tight group after to me the top 6 of Acuna, Witt, Rodriguez, Betts, Carroll, and Freddie Freeman in some order. And then to me, there's a tier of like 10 players or so that I could almost talk myself into any order. And Trey Turner's certainly a part of that group, as is Kyle Tucker, who went 6th here.
From August 1st on, Trey Turner hit 317 with the Phillies. So, first year mega contract. We've talked all about it. I think maybe there was some added pressure and the strikeouts were up early on, but eventually he did get going, and maybe he doesn't hit over 300, but if I was projecting, I would say 280 plus. I think that's fair for Trey Turner.
You dig into the plate discipline data beyond just walks and strikeouts, and it's pretty clear Trey Turner was chasing early on more than he typically does, which would feed into he was pressing to live up to the new contract argument. And it seems like that may very well have been what was afflicting Trey Turner for the first 2/3 of the season.
The back half of the first round, again, this is a 15-team league. I realize many people listening, you probably play in like 10 or 12-team league, so it's going to sound a little bit different to you. But again, just getting an idea for where players are going. Spencer Strider, first starting pitcher off the board at 9th overall, followed by Jose Ramirez, Matt Olson, Bryce Harper, Fernando Tatis to me at pick 13, followed by Juan Soto and Aaron Judge. Honestly, I was pretty shocked, Scott, to get Fernando Tatis at 13. I know he's kind of a polarizing player. Going into this draft, my plan was to get one of Jose Ramirez or Bryce Harper. And honestly, I saw those two guys go, and I just assumed Tatis was gone already. I was about to click on Aaron Judge and just draft him. And then last second, I realized, oh, crap, no one took Fernando Tatis. So I just took him. Anything else stand out here? Maybe a touch early on Matt Olson.
Maybe, but it's again part of a enormous tier.
Yeah.
All of these players are. None of these players stand out as really like a problem pick. Maybe Juan Soto at 14. The fact that he went ahead of Aaron Judge. It's been a couple years since Juan Soto was a real asset and batting average, and he, considering how he measures up to these other players in the home run and stolen base categories, you really need him to thrive in batting average to justify a first round pick. Not to say he should go much later than this, but Judge and some hitters you haven't even mentioned yet, like Corey Seager and Yordan Alvarez, to me, they all need to go ahead of Juan Soto pretty clearly. Maybe Juan Soto has a bounce back season where he competes for a batting title. Maybe he gets traded to the Yankees and becomes, more of a 40 homer guy than a 30 homer guy.
Yes.
But based on what we know now about all these players, I think the safer bet is to drop Juan Soto to round 2, especially given the caliber of hitters that you can draft instead, and treat the possibility of the rebounded batting average as less of a certainty than just, it would be a nice outcome. It would be a nice outcome if it happens, but you're not paying for that with Juan Soto anymore.
The second round got kicked off with Corey Seager, followed by Garrett Cole, who was the SP2 off the board at pick 17. Then Yordan Alvarez went to me. So I paired Alvarez with Fernando Tatis. Then Shohei Ohtani, Bo Bichette, Ozzie Albies, Austin Riley, Rafael Devers, Pete Alonso. I realize I threw a lot of names your way, but there's a reason why I did that. So first off, I'm going to mention a month ago, I did an early mock draft. I got Yordan Alvarez in the second round. I said, there's no way that's going to happen again. And here we are. It's like I got Yordan Alvarez at pick 18 here. So, I mean, first off, that's pretty surprising to me. Ohtani at pick 19, I think that probably sounds about right. He's recovering from Tommy John surgery. We know he's not going to pitch next season. He's a free agent. We don't know where he's going to pitch yet. They want him to be ready for opening day. I'm not exactly sure. So that's the next point. And the reason I mentioned all those hitters, Scott, I think they're all great. And I think they're worthy of going in this range. There's not much speed. That's a common theme that I noticed here in the early second round. It's, maybe Albies gives you 10 to 15, Bo Bichette, maybe 10 steals, but
yeah, he's really dropped off in that.
Ohtani, if he's ready on opening day, he'll probably give you 20 plus steals. But really, a lot of those names, they'll give you power, maybe some of them batting average, but there's really not much speed. So it's just something that stood out to me.
Yeah, and I think that's why I've ultimately decided, okay, as much as I like Mookie Betts, as much as I like Freddie Freeman, the top 4 in a Roto League need to be Acuna, Witt, Julio Rodriguez, Corbin Carroll, guys who've shown the capacity for 40 plus steals, if not, 50 plus steals. In Acuna's case, 70 plus steals. Nobody's debating Acuna at number 1, obviously, but those others, Witt, Rodriguez, Carroll, they have to go ahead of Betts and Freeman, because like they give you such a strong foundation in stolen bases, which are much more plentiful, and you don't have to fill them in the early rounds anymore. But to get that many from a player who does so many other things so well is just it makes your path so much easier. And so conversely, if you're not somebody who's picking that early in the draft, well, that means the non-base stealers are the ones, that's still first round caliber hitters, but they're not giving you tons of steals for the most part, and that lasts for the first couple rounds. So that's kind of a problem, and I guess that justifies moving Trey Turner up, as happened in this draft, him going 7th overall, Kyle Tucker 6th, same thing. I have Kyle Tucker about that high, but Turner is the one I'm kind of hesitating on. I guess that would be the justification for it, is if you don't give yourself that strong steals foundation in round 1 with a Tucker or a Turner, then it's not going to be there in round 2 either, at least not without reaching for it. We'll see how the rest of the draft goes, but it's less. It is also worth noting that it's less essential now to get those stolen bases filled early, because they're so much more widespread. But you'd rather have them than not.
Yeah,
I think no matter what stage of the draft you're talking about,
there are more steals available, but you also need more steals to compete than ever before. So you still have to find a way to get steals on your team, basically, is the point. Yes, you can get them in the middle rounds, but yeah, I mean, why wouldn't you fill them early if you had that possibility?
You're more likely to sacrifice in something else if you're trying to make up ground in stolen bases. Then you're not really sacrificing anything if you're taking care of them in round 1.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly why you want those guys. The back half of the second round, remember I left off with Devers and Pete Alonso. So it was Alonso at pick 24. Then we got Adolis Garcia, Ellie De La Cruz, Marcus Semien, Jose Altuve, Gunnar Henderson, and Francisco Lindor. Ellie De La Cruz went at pick 26. He was paired with Corbin Carroll in the first round, which is incredibly fun, Scott, but I think does leave yourself to a little bit of risk. Obviously, 2 young guys. I think Carroll's pretty much proven. I've mentioned the shoulder over and over again, but Ellie De La Cruz's batting average, I have no idea. Does he hit 220? Does he hit 260? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. This is where I say things that can sometimes come back to bite me. So I'm going to try and put it a little differently than I have in the past. Because Ellie De La Cruz has enormous potential. He could be a top 5 player overall next year, and this pick will look great. But nobody can honestly tell me today that he will be a top 5 player. Maybe he will. We all acknowledge he has a possibility to be, but he had major contact issues in the second half, especially. And didn't really put the ball in the air enough to take advantage of his massive power potential either. So like there's some growing that still needs to be done. Maybe it'll happen just this offseason and he'll turn into a mega stud next year. And then people will say, oh, Scott, you were so wrong about Ellie De La Cruz. But I'm just being honest. Like I can't say this will happen for Ellie De La Cruz next year. So to take him this early in the second round is a major, major gamble that could pay off. But you're passing up some pretty good players for that gamble. And particularly from the guy who took Corbin Carroll in round 1, like he doesn't have to stress about speed at all. The way, somebody who took Freddie Freeman, let's say, in round 1 has to. So it's kind of an odd pairing. I think the justification for taking Ellie De La Cruz in round 2, and it's worth reminding everybody, 15-team league. So would this technically be a round 3 pick?
Yeah,
in a 12-team league,
early third. Yeah, pick 26.
Still, it's high any way you look at it. Like if you're gonna the justification for that would be, okay, well, he's probably a 40 steal guy regardless of what happens with the bat, and I wanted to take care of the steals that I missed out on with my first pick or 2 picks. But that's not the case coming from the guy who took Corbin Carroll. So just a weird pairing there, I would say.
Yeah, I think maybe someone like Semien or Francisco Lindor paired with Corbin Carroll, they just feel safer, higher floor. Just looking at the players that went just after him. So I don't know, kind of thinking out loud on those two.
Yeah.
Let's take our final break. When we return, we really haven't talked about pitching. Where is all the pitching? We'll talk about that right after this.
The Scudetto, where the soul of Italy meets the pinnacle of calcio. Catch Serie A on CBS Sports Network and streaming live on Paramount+.
Welcome back in. We're going over my first draft for 2024. This is a real draft. It's going to be played out. It's a 15-team, 5x5 roto draft and hold format. And we left off, where is all the pitching? Only 2 pitchers drafted in the first 31 picks. And then we saw a bunch of pitchers go in the third round. Zach Wheeler at pick 32, Corbin Burnes at 34, Luis Castillo at 35, Kevin Gausman at 36, Pablo Lopez at 42. And then I got Zach Gallen at pick 43. So again, the first 8 starting pitchers drafted in order: Spencer Strider, Garrett Cole, Zach Wheeler, Corbin Burnes, Luis Castillo, Kevin Gausman, Pablo Lopez, Zach Gallen. Does that sound about right?
About right. I think there's a clear top 7 at starting pitcher. I think Gallen is in it and Lopez isn't. I was actually worried I was ranking Lopez too high at 12th overall, because he was a big source of strikeouts last year, unveiling a new sweeper that, in addition to already having that great changeup, he had a big strikeout total. The ERA was kind of high, but the ERA estimators were much lower. And so I get it. I get wanting to elevate Pablo Lopez. I think most people are going to look at the ERA he finished with, and Pablo Lopez's track record is kind of mid, I would say. So they're going to look at him having a 3.66 ERA and having that mid track record and say, I can't draft him as high as 12th, or where he went here, 7th among starting pitchers, right? 7th.
Yeah.
But maybe it's justified. I do think there's if you're selling out for strikeouts, I do think Lopez is a more likely to, between Lopez and Gallen, Lopez is more likely to have more next year. But it was a good get there, Gallen, I think, for you toward the end of round 3. And I think just in terms of the general approach to pitching that was taken in this draft, it's the way to go. I'm a little disappointed to see it. I'm both disappointed to see it because I can't take advantage of other people mixing in more pitchers in round 1 and 2 and building a greater lineup as a result of that. So I'm disappointed in that aspect, but I'm also feel validated because other people are taking the approach I feel is the right one to take, where Spencer Strider, Garrett Cole, if you're going to draft a pitcher early, it's got to be one of those 2. But no one else is worth drafting until the true stud hitters are off the board. And there's probably 25 or so stud hitters, if not more. It was actually more that went off the board before the third starting pitcher did. So I think that's right. I think that reflects the breakdown of the starting pitcher position right now, where we're light on standouts and deep in the middle, I guess. Still haven't decided exactly where the glob cutoff is. Obviously, it's later than guys like Luis Castillo and Zach Gallen and Pablo Lopez. But you want to get a couple at least of the pre-glob pitchers, I would say, if not three.
And to be clear, I did not want to take Zach Gallen with my 3rd round pick, which will lead into the discussion of my 4th round pick. I was looking at guys like Michael Harris, Luis Robert, Randy Arozarena. All those guys went in the middle of the 3rd.
I think you did right. I think you did the right thing. I mean, you already had Tatis and Alvarez, 2 outfilders with big impact potential. I mean, either one of them could be their league's MVP next year, I would say. Fernando Tatis, we acted like he was a big disappointment, after missing almost the first month, finishing off his suspension, coming back from a couple major surgeries, wrist and shoulder, and had a 25 homer, 29 steal season. We're thinking, oh, this is a big disappointment. Well, that just shows you how high the upside is for Tatis, because I think those numbers in and of themselves could justify you taking him where you did. So you have a really strong hitting foundation. I think by the time your 3rd round pick came up here late in round 3, like all the super stud hitters are gone.
Yeah.
To me, they ended maybe around Francisco Alvarez, Jose Altuve late in round 2. I don't know. Maybe you could make the argument Vladimir Guerrero was part of that group too. He went in round 3. But I don't think Michael Harris is part of that group. I don't think Randy Arozarena is part of that group. Maybe Luis Robert, but you're gambling a lot on health there. He managed to stay relatively healthy this past year, but that's been the exception for Luis Robert, I would say. And just especially given that this is a 15 league, how quickly pitching is going to start flying off the board. I think Zach Gallen was absolutely the right call there.
All right, so let's get into my 4th round pick. This is my first kind of wild card type pick, and I tweeted out my team, and some people just lost their minds. They're like, the player I took was CJ Abrams, and some people were like, wow, Abrams, great value. Some people said, what, are you kidding me? This is someone that we were drafting outside the top 200 last year. And now you got to take him in the 4th round. Are you crazy? I don't know. I will explain my thinking, Scott, and obviously you can respond. We'll find out. My thinking, I felt like I needed more speed because I took Alvarez in the 2nd round. I didn't really love any of the players that were available in this kind of early 4th round, which sounds crazy to say. It's like still so early in the draft, but some guys that went right after I took CJ Abrams: Freddie Peralta, Jazz Chisholm, Christian Yelich, Royce Lewis, George Kirby, Cody Bellinger, Christian Walker, Nolan Jones.
Look at Nolan Jones, round 4. Yes.
And then there was this huge pitching run after that too. So maybe the one exception, Mike Trout went at pick 68, which seems pretty late, but
oh yeah,
I couldn't take, in my opinion, I couldn't take Trout and Alvarez on the same team. It just seems like too much injury risk, especially in a 15-team league. So I know Abrams is not really proven, but I felt like I needed the speed, and I really didn't love those hitters and pitchers that went right after him. So what do you think, Scott? CJ Abrams, pick 48.
I don't love it. I mean, when you sent me your team and I saw you'd taken CJ Abrams round 4, okay. I just absent all other context, I don't know what the shortstop situation looks like at that point. I don't know what the stolen base situation looks like at that point. And I don't think, removed from all context, it didn't strike me as a big issue you taking Abrams there. Okay, maybe those were needs that were urgent to fill at that point in the draft. I'm usually thinking in terms of 12-team league, and sometimes adding those 3 extra teams can create different scarcities than you're used to seeing in a 12-team format. But now that I have the full draft board here, and I see Ha-Sung Kim going more than 2 rounds later, I actually have Kim ahead of Abrams. Their numbers were very similar this past year. Part of it is just Kim is going to be triple eligible, and Abrams is shortstop only. So that's part of the reason I give the slight edge to Kim. But 2 rounds difference. Okay, give me Kim. And then even beyond that, Bryson Stott. I'm trying to see if he's shortstop eligible. I can't remember.
I think he's only second base.
I think he's only second base. So he doesn't fill the shortstop need, but he went 5 rounds later.
Yeah, he went after the top 100.
Than CJ Abrams. And I expect CJ Abrams to have the most steals of those 3, but not by more than 10 to 12. It's a couple 30 to 35 steals guys, and then a 40 to 45 steals guy. In theory, I don't know. The one thing I might be underestimating here with Abrams is that, okay, I'm looking at the total number of steals he had this past year, and it was 47. Great total.
He could get better.
Well, that's what I was going to say. 47, 33 of them were in the second half. In fact, he only had 9 stolen bases after the first 3 months. So the final 3 months, he got 38 of those 47 steals, which, I mean, if he just decided to start running, basically. And if he continues to run at that pace next year, then maybe he's more like a 60 steal guy. So that would, there's a 60 steal guy, this looks a lot different. But I think just given the relative value for other prolific base stealers compared to other prolific base stealers with power issues like Ha-Sung Kim and Bryson Stott, 2 rounds later for Kim, 5 rounds later for Stott. I don't know that Abrams was the greatest pick.
I would agree with that, by the way. I mean, given the context, it's just
first draft of the year. You don't know where those guys are going to go.
What makes his draft so fun is I had no idea. I had no idea where anybody was going to go. So it was pretty.
Usually I see early draft results and I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to redo my rankings. I'm not feeling that way looking at these. I think I pretty much nailed it.
Is there any hitter or pitcher that went right after Abrams that you think was like a slam dunk pick that I passed on? Because I really don't feel that way.
Let's see here. So
your boy Tarek Skubal went at the end of the 4th. I guess I could have done that.
Yeah.
I'll tell you. So the other player I was debating with Abrams was Tyler Glasnow. And then I got him at the end of the 5th round. Right.
So almost 2 rounds later.
Should not have happened.
I have Glasnow ranked ahead of Skubal, so I wouldn't have.
Right.
I thought I was crazy ranking Skubal 9th, but I have Glasnow 8th. So maybe I'm crazy to do both. I don't know. Crazy like a fox. Yeah, slam dunk. Okay, so the hitters. I'm pretty sure my top 300 is going to have Cody Bellinger ahead of CJ Abrams, and he went later.
Mm-hmm.
Royce Lewis, he'll probably be ahead of Abrams. And frankly, I'll probably have Nolan Jones ahead of Abrams.
Okay.
Mike Trout, I'm still kind of floored he went as late as he did. I thought I was, because I haven't had Bellinger even.
But do you think roster construction wise, you could pair Trout with Alvarez? It seems too risky to me.
Meh. I mean, I know Alvarez can get a little annoying with the injuries, but he's still. How many games did he play? He played,
I think 130.
Well, he played 114, which isn't that many, but he hit 31 homers. He drove in 97 runs.
Yeah, that's bad, man. 114.
Well, I know, but 31 homers and 97 runs. He's such a prolific hitter, and Trout's kind of in the same boat where even though he misses more time than you'd like, I know it was even more than usual this past year, but he played just in 2022. Trout played 119 games, 40 homers,
It's just the replacement value when those guys are out. In a 15-team league, it's so bad. It's just
I know, but their numbers are good without even prorating it. Their numbers are just their totals are good for guys who play only 3/4 of the season. Well, that's what I'm saying. Not even for guys who play 3/4 of the season. Their numbers are good, and it just so happens that they only play 3/4 of the season.
Yeah. So maybe that's the one. Maybe it's Trout. I thought about it afterwards and like, yeah, maybe that was the guy I should have taken over Abrams. I
Well,
hear
and,
you
and,
on
and I,
Bellinger and Nolan Jones. I don't know. I guess I'm not completely sold on those guys. I also still need to, kind of dive deeper into Nolan Jones. Haven't done that yet. So,
and I guess this is the point I was making with the point I was trying to make with the stolen bases earlier, where it's not as critical to sell out for them early. Okay, maybe it still makes sense for a guy who would be a first rounder even without the stolen bases, like the Bobby Witts and Kyle Tuckers of the world. But the next wave of base stealers, you don't have to sell out so hard for them, and that's going to be something we have to kind of retrain ourselves. We're going to have to retrain ourselves for that reality in a roto league, particularly a deep roto league like this, where it's like, oh man, it's round 4. I don't have enough steals. They're going to be gone soon. And then, you see Bryson Stott going in round 9. Like, that's just not, there's just not the same urgency as there used to be because there are enough of those guys, I would say.
I think some of these will correct themselves. I agree with you with this draft, but I feel like as more drafts happen, people will realize the things that you're talking about, and Bryson Stott will move up, and I think guys like Ha-Seong Kim and Nico Horner potentially move up as well, and maybe CJ Abrams moves down a little bit. Maybe I overdrafted him, so we'll see.
I don't know. I mean, he was a tough one for me to rank. He's 12th. Others who went quite a bit later than you took him. Other shortstops who went quite a bit later than you took Abrams, who I have ranked ahead of him, O'Neal Cruz.
Cruz was a good pick. He went at...
It was round 8.
Yeah, the first pick of round 8, so that would have been 106. That seems really good.
I guess that's it. So it was Nico Horner who went around later, round 5. Ha-Seong Kim who went in round 6. O'Neal Cruz who went in round 8. I have them all ranked ahead of CJ Abrams, who you took in round 4. And so I guess that would be the issue with it. But I mean, if he's a 60 steal guy, like I said, it changes everything.
I had a bunch of things planned, a bunch of players I wanted to talk about. We do have a mock draft that's coming up soon, so we'll have the opportunity to talk about a bunch more. I'll quickly just run through the rest of my team, Scott, and you could give a quick critique on it. The offense that I wound up with, Salvador Perez and Austin Wells as my 2 catchers. The infield, Vinny Pasquantino, Gleyber Torres, CJ Abrams. I've got Jake Berger at third base, Jamer Candelario as my corner, Zach Geloff as my middle. And then in the outfield, I've got Fernando Tatis, Yordan Alvarez, Josh Lowe, Lars Nootbaar, and Sal Frelick. I do not have a util hitter yet, so I'll get one of those when things pick back up.
Oh, this ain't over.
No. We picked this draft back up in January, so the final 27 rounds. There's still a lot to happen. I think batting average could be a problem. Abrams, Geloff, Berger, Wells. I think all those guys could hit under 250. I don't know. It's all right. Well, we could talk about the pitching staff too. If I known I could have gotten Zach Geloff 2 rounds after Gleyber Torres, I probably would have taken Gleyber Torres and probably would have taken a pitcher there. But what do you think of the offense?
I like it. I my one takeaway, and you hadn't sent me quite this much of your team. So your rotation is Zach Gallen, Tyler Glasnow, Michael King, round 11 as your number 3 starting pitcher. And I think I would have liked another starting pitcher somewhere between Glasnow and King.
Yeah, I agree.
Maybe instead of like Gleyber Torres, who you took in round 8, especially, I have the foreknowledge you're going to get Zach Geloff 2 rounds later. It just seems like if you I prefer Geloff to Torres. So if you're going to get Geloff 2 rounds later, there's no reason to take Torres in round 8. And pitchers you could have had there, Kyle Bradish.
Bradish is the one. He's the one that really stands out to me.
I think he's my favorite. Next round, you see like Gavin Williams go. This is kind of where my pitching ranks differ from what happened here in this draft, because Sonny Gray and Bailey Ober both go in this range too, and I have them lower in my rankings because they're not big strikeout guys.
Yeah.
So that's probably that's the range of the draft where I would load up a little more on starting pitcher than you did. I mean, especially now that I have more rounds at my disposal here. You got Jake Berger in round 15 of a 15-team league. That seems great.
Yeah.
That is the kind of power bat that I would not expect to be available that late.
I think in ADP, when I looked at it, he's a 12th rounder. So again, I think it's just everyone is drafting for the first time and some guys are slipping through the cracks. So I needed a third baseman desperately. My plan was to take Berger and then Steven Kwan. I think those two are a pretty good pairing later on in drafts. I took Berger and then Steven Kwan went with the very next pick. So I couldn't pull that off. I think it would have helped the batting average out a little bit.
I don't know. Berger might not be so bad for batting average based on the adjustments he made after joining the Marlins.
Yeah.
I'm trying to see. So the third baseman I have ranked just a little ahead of Berger, Noelvi Marte, and the Rays guy.
Caminero.
Junior Caminero, yeah. Noelvi Marte and Junior Caminero, they both went in round 12, so 3 rounds earlier than you took Berger.
Yeah.
And then where's Max Muncy?
Max Muncy went in the 10th, 5 rounds earlier.
Yeah, I mean, I'd rather have Berger in round 15 than Muncy in round 10, especially maybe not in a points league because Muncy gets all those walks, but in a categories league, I mean, I expect Muncy to be a worse source of batting average and potentially a much worse source of batting average than Berger.
Yep. Quickly read off the starting pitchers I wound up with. I mentioned Zach Gallen, Tyler Glasnow, Michael King as my SP3, Aaron Savali, Christopher Sanchez, Marcus Stroman, John Means, Sawyer Gibson-Long, and my relievers, I got Raisel Iglesias in the 6th round, and I got Kyle Finnegan in round 19 as my second closer. I agree completely. I feel like I need another pitcher in there. I like Savali. I think he's sneaky. Like maybe the Rays can work some kind of Zach Eflin magic with him for a full season.
It's very gloppy, though.
Yes. I was just looking for boring innings at that point, but every time I queued somebody up like Merrill Kelly or Jose Barrios, they would go right before my pick. And so I just missed out on a bunch of guys. Like Stroman is probably like that, just kind of boring innings kind of guy, but I need more.
I think I want 4 pre-glob starting pitchers, even in a 15-teamer like this. And you got 2.5 in Gallen, Glasnow, and Michael King. I'm calling King half because I think he's certainly proved capable of transcending the glob, but obviously very unproven in the role, having just entered into it for the last month and a half of last year.
I'll tell you what, Scott, if you want to pull that off, you're probably looking at 4 starting pitchers in your first 10 picks, which means you're either going to have to sacrifice like a closer 1 or, 5 of your first 10 picks are going to be pitchers. So it's something get the wheels turning and you start thinking about it. But, at that point, 5 hitters, 5 pitchers in your first 10 rounds.
I mean, we substitute Kyle Bradish for Gleyber Torres. It's basically done.
Yeah, but then do you feel good about the offense is the question.
Yeah, I think so.
All right. Well, lots to learn. First draft is in the books. And again, if you're watching us live on YouTube, you can follow along with the draft board here. But we are going to wrap there. For Scott, I am Frank. Thanks as always for tuning in to Fantasy Baseball today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. And we will be back again tomorrow. Bye-bye.